Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be working on some Quarkus REST API fun with OpenAPI and the small RI implementation of the microprofile implementation for JAX-RS. So here we go. What we're really going to be doing is kind of combining a couple different things. We're going to be using Quarkus to write some JSON web services, some REST services. We're going to be building it using the Jakarta RESTful Web Services spec, and we're also going to be using the small RI OpenAPI implementation of the Eclipse microprofile OpenAPI. So we're going to be combining all of these things, putting them together in a quick API build. And for us to go ahead and get started with that, we're going to need a Quarkus project. So we're going to start off with a simple Quarkus create app command. So the Quarkus CLI is installed here. We're going to create a new app. We're going to put a Maven wrapper on there. We're not going to put any of the code that comes out with the starter code. We're gonna start from scratch. We're going to go ahead and add all of the extensions that we're going to need for this little quick demo. Config YAML, just because I like config YAML, REST JSON, small RI OpenAPI, and the hibernate validator, which plays well into the OpenAPI generation piece of this. So we're going to run that real quick, and that is going to create our project for us. So now we can cd into that, and there's our project, and we can open that up in our favorite IDE, which for me is IntelliJ. So boom, here we go, ready to go. Always want to make sure that everything is squared away here. So we're going to use, again, the Quarkus CLI to get it started in dev mode. We're going to do Quarkus dev -- clean, which runs the Maven clean target before it runs the Maven Quarkus :dev target for Maven. So there it is. It's up and running. It's ready to go. And if we switch over here to our local host, 8080, boom, there's our dev UI. We're going to go ahead and close these other windows. We don't need them. So when you visit the dev UI, it has the extensions already and the UI goodies built in for all of our stuff that we want to do today. So here's all of our REST endpoints. Here's all of our small RI OpenAPI implementation pieces of it, which we'll get into. And so we're ready to go. If we go ahead and look at the schema that's for our REST API, we don't have anything, which is cool, which is because we haven't actually implemented anything. So the very first thing that we're going to want to do, we're going to be building a customer API today. Why customer API? Because it's simple and we know it pretty well. So what we're going to want to do is get into here and actually build our first record. We're going to be doing this all code first, so we're not going to be building any OpenAPI spec by hand. It's all going to be code-based. So we'll build our first class, customer v1. We're going to make that a record because records are cool. And then now we're going to build our actual object real quick. It's going to be fairly simple. We're going to want a first name, and we definitely don't want that to be empty. So first name's going to be there, string, middle name. Let's just leave that out for now. We're just going to do first name, last name, not empty, string, last name. And let's add an email address. So let's put somebody's email address in there. So we're going to say an email validator, and it's going to be mandatory. Let's put that in there, and then we'll put a string email. So there we go. First name, last name, email for our customer record. That's good to go there. You'll notice we're using the Jakarta validation annotations. Those annotations will actually end up influencing our OpenAPI spec build out that's done by the tool. So that's pretty cool. I did the customer v1 there. I usually like to put a package in there that's like something like API v1 or something to separate it out so we can do different versions of the API. So we're going to go ahead and move that around just because I like to do it like that. So, so there we go. So there's our customer v1. And now let's do our actual resource. So this is going to be the customer resource v1. And this is going to be the beginning of our actual REST API. So with the REST API, there's a bunch of different things you need to put in here. This is, like I said before, this is kind of a blending of the Jakarta spec along with the microprofile spec, the Eclipse microprofile spec that's provided by SmallRye. So we're going to do two things. Is one, we're building our actual REST API. And then the second thing we're actually doing is building the documentation around our OpenAPI spec. So it's all going to be mingled together and work out really, really well for us. Here's our path. We're going to do API v1 and customers. So that is just normal REST type of stuff. We're going to produce nothing but JSON, so that's pretty cool. We can put, oh wait, that's not the right one. Media type is there. Oh no, application JSON, right? Sorry, I'm not. So there's our consuming application JSON, and we're going to add our tag for this. So our tag, which is the OpenAPI spec side of it, is going to be name, customer, and then a description, customer operations. Perfect, cool. So now we're there. So let's go ahead and do our baseline implementation. We're going to create a really sophisticated backend, which is going to be a hash map. Well, it's just gonna be a map. So we're gonna put the email address as the key, and then we'll just keep all the customers in there as well. So there's our customer map. New concurrent hash map. Perfect. Okay, so there we go. There's our beginning of our implementation. We don't really have any functions on it yet, so let's go ahead and start off with our first one, which is going to be our get all. Right, so we want to go ahead and do our method, our verb right there, which is a Jakarta. I keep on saying Jakarta annotation, and we're going to start building some of our API responses. So there's two different. So there's this aggregated API responses one, which is literally just if you look at the actual internals for this, all it is like it's a grouping of API responses, so we can just put the normal just API response at this level. Our response code is going to be 200, and then our description, because we always like to provide a good description. Remember, this is going to come up into our API OpenAPI spec as well. So this is going to be get all customers. There we go. And then we want to actually describe what's going to be returning. So that's where our content description comes in. Forgot there's needs a comma, content, media type, application JSON. We don't have to put the application type in there on these things because we've already defined it up here at the top. So you only need to change the content, custom, the type if it's different or something like that. So in this, we're just going to do a schema, and we're going to do the implementation. The implementation is actually the customer v1 class. That's cool, but the actual type is going to be a schema type of array, because we're going to be returning an array of customers, not just one. This is a public response, get all customers, cool. And then we're going to return a response with OK with the values from the customer map. and build that response. Save. What is this going to go look like over here? So let's go over here and look at our extensions and look at our schema for the YAML, and look at that. We're already starting to build our OpenAPI spec here. So so there's our info and our versions and everything else that was there before. We introduced that tag, so that is now in our schema YAML. And then there's our first path with our first get, our verb, it's tagged. And then there's our response definition, which is, of course, down here. It picked up that schema from the record that we generated. So if you look here, here's their customer v1 schema. Those validation annotations created these required YAML or schema, JSON schema definitions, which is pretty neat. Same thing with the min length down here. So that's pretty neat. So keep in mind as you're building out with your validation annotations, it actually influences the OpenAPI spec and how that's built. And of course, if you get into the extension, you can go into the actual Swagger UI. There's our get customers. You can give it a try, execute. Everything's going to work. 200, nothing's there because we have an empty hash map on the back end. Easy breezy. Okay. Next one that we're going to throw in here is we're going to throw in our post, right? Because we want to create something. So let's go ahead and do a post, and we're going to build an API response for our for when we actually create it. Created a response code is 201. It is not 200, people. So make sure that when you're building a REST API, use the spec correctly. Customer created is our description. Now we just have to define the response content. So that's going to reply with the actual implementation. So that's going to be our schema is the at schema. And our type is object, so you don't have to include that. All you have to do is include the implementation is equal to the customer v1 dot class. We also are going to have an a negative API response, right? Because we could have something go wrong, right? Something could not be validated or be null, that kind of thing. Response code there is 400, meaning you did something wrong. Description is invalid customer. And we'll leave that as it is right now, just like that. And now we're going to build out the public response when we create the customer. It's going to put it's going to build a little bit of the code generation is going to build this out a little bit for us, but we want to add in a couple other things. One of them is we need to build in the URI info. Where is that? Oh, it's the context. Context. We want to inject the context for the URI info in the builder. We're going to use that when we build our response. And then we also want to add in a not null check because we want to make sure that the customer is actually there. It is surprising the valid validation check there when you add the add valid in the framework. It doesn't check to make sure that it's not completely null. So you do have to include that in there. And then once that is there, we just need to do a quick check to see if the customer already exists in the customer map. So customer map contains key customer.email. If it does, then we want to return a status of invalid customer. Sorry about that. Bad request. We'll just return that for now. And if that doesn't work out, we're going to go ahead and put that customer into the customer map. And then we're going to return the status of created, but we're also going to add in this a URI as well, right? So we're going to do a URI builder. So let's do URI. Sorry, I'm always URI. There we go. Get absolute path builder, path customer email build. That actually works out perfectly for us. And then once we do this, you actually do created with the URI, and then you add the entity into the result. So we can just put the customer object right back into there. Typically, you'd return the customer if it generated an ID or if it changed timestamps or something like that. For this implementation, we're just putting it in there real fast. So that's all good. We hit save. Let's go over here and see how our schema changed. So everything here is still the same. There's our get that's still there. But look, we got a fancy new post, which is nice. So it has the same tags on there, defines the request body, and then it defines both of those responses of 201 and 400. That's good to go, which all refer to the same schema. All good. This actually works out really, really well. And then from there, you don't really have to, you can just continue to build out your REST API as you need to. So you can add the put and the post and the get by ID and things like that into the application. So when you go back over here and you go into the extensions, you can actually open up that Swagger UI and go mess around with this thing and say, hey, let's create a new person. Let's put myself in the system, my email at yahoo.com. There we go. And we're going to hit execute. That's going to come back with our 201 code. It means it was created. We get everything back. And then look, there's that URI that we built for the customer. It's based on the email address for the location. That usually would be like a customer ID or something like that, but no big deal there. And then if we go up to our get, we can hit try it out and get our response body back. So that is it. That is how quickly you can get up and running and going with your REST API in building not only the Swagger portions of it out, but you can also quickly use the code first to build out your OpenAPI schema, and it's that easy. So more next time. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.